Hello, my friends. We are continuing with our chapter-by-chapter discussion of this book, Light Bearer, The Life and Legacy of Swami Kriyananda. So today we are up to the year 1999, which is really the end of an extraordinary cycle in Ananda's history. So let's start with a prayer, and then we'll look at some pictures, as we always do. Heavenly Father, Divine Mother, Friend, Beloved God, Jesus Christ, Babaji Krishna, Lahiri Mahashaya, Swami Sri Yukteswar, Beloved Master Paramahansa Yogananda, Saints of all religions, dear friend and guide Swami Kriyananda, humbly we bow to all. May your living presence inspire and guide us, that everything we do will be in harmony with thy will. Om. Peace. Amen. So I'd like to start with some photographs, as we always do. We're getting closer to modern times, so we have more color pictures. Most of the photos that I have to share with you here at the beginning are really not situations, but more just people. And I've mentioned before, Swamiji did a whole slideshow just of faces to show the different consciousness that people have. And of course, this is my family album, so it has a particular meaning for me. But I hope that you can feel some of the spirit of Ananda that is expressed through these photographs, beginning here with Swami Kriyananda. This is a picture of him taken at the Assisi Temple. And you know, these last years of the 90s was when Swami really began to establish himself with another residence in Italy. Prior to this time, he was traveling and spending periods of time there, but now it really became another home for him, which was a significant shift in all of Ananda for Swamiji not to live at the village anymore. But Ananda was becoming Ananda Palo Alto, Ananda San Francisco, Ananda Sacramento, Ananda Assisi, Italy, so why wouldn't Swamiji be resident in all of those places? So here he is in the Assisi Temple, also giving satsang, probably Sunday satsang there, because he would only wear his robes usually when he was giving satsang. The chair that's behind him was Swamiji's chair, and I think since his passing, they certainly have it marked. I'm not sure that anyone else sits in it, but I'm skipping ahead of myself. We're just pretending that we're in year 1999, and everything in front of it is a mystery. This is a group of some of the devotees in Italy, and this is where the world brotherhood aspect of Ananda really begins to show. Italian, German, American, Canadian, although Keshava, who's behind Lisa there, was born and raised in Canada, although he's really lived as an American, lived within America in all his spiritual life. But all the same happy faces united by divine love. This is Arjuna and Shivani, who became pioneers in founding Ananda, Italy. Shivani was also a founding member of Ananda Village. She was one of the small group of people who wintered over the first year, 1968, I believe. And she had a pioneer spirit. She said about herself, by the time they're putting sidewalks into Ananda Village, I hope I'm in the wilderness, plowing up the wilderness again. And so her desire was fulfilled. So she got to be a key, absolutely, I would say a pillar of founding both Ananda Village and what has become Ananda Assisi. Her husband, again, Arjuna, with Swamiji. The meaning of the popcorn is lost on me, but apparently it meant a lot to the two of them. This is so typical Swamiji. He was so at ease, and it was so natural for us to just be ourselves with him. There was no sort of false um, distance. It was a very interesting relationship with Swamiji because there was always a sense of reverence and respect, speaking for myself and speaking for many. So you never were over familiar with him. It was actually a good model for relating to everyone because there was always a dignity about him which compelled us to be more dignified than we might have been otherwise. But it didn't result in any kind of inhibition of any uplifting quality within us. In fact, just the opposite. Even humor and friendliness, it all had a very refined quality to it. And so whatever the popcorn story was here, Arjuna and Swamiji together. This is also in the what was called now Moksha Kutir. Well, that time it was called Seva Kutir. The Kutir means cottage, the house of service. And it was his birthday, seemingly. This lady is visiting from the USA. Maybe she lived there for a time, but mostly I think she was visiting. Happy birthday, Swamiji. More celebrations. This is Kalyani on the far left. The gentleman in the middle, whose name I can't recall, and Swamiji. This is, again, we're having a birthday, but now we're having the birthday in the U.S. You know, Swamiji always wore beautiful colors and beautiful fabrics at a time, both from India and also when he went to Thailand at one point. He just went to a tailor and he picked out every beautiful color of silk that there was and had these casual shirts created for him, and he would just have so much pleasure in wearing those colors. It's an important thing to realize because the advent of, in much more recent years, of so many renunciates, Nayaswamis and so on, has made people less attentive to the color that they wear, or less flexible in the color that they wear. But Swamiji was he felt very much that the atmosphere around us was exceedingly important. And positive colors, bright, clear colors, have a very, very uplifting effect on the consciousness. And so he exemplified that himself. Let's see, this is in a house at Ananda village, belongs to Netri and Jivada, or the far left and right of this picture, and Durga and Vidura, and David Hogendijk in the middle. Netri was a fabulous cook, and her kitchen, whenever you were fortunate enough to visit, it was always a gastronomic pleasure as well. She's written several cookbooks, was instrumental in the basic Ananda cookbook as well. A holiday dinner with Swamiji. It was Jyoti's birthday, so they're all gathered around the table in her home. She was also a cook, a beautiful cook. I mean, not only, but had that great skill. Jyotish and Devi, classic photograph of them through the years. You can see why Swamiji had so much confidence in their spiritual attunement. It's just so self-evident in the light in their eyes. And this is Sadhana Devi, the lifelong partner of Jaya. They were an early couple at Ananda and had a beautiful daughter, Shyama, whom she raised at Ananda village. Only after the daughter was grown did they begin to travel and move around the world more. This is Vidura and Ganga Mata serving some kind of a party or a dinner happening at Crystal Hermitage. It looks like they were taking care of people at the dinner table. Drupada and Yashoda. Drupada is Ananda's resident Vedic astrologer. Lovely couple. And Drupada's helped countless souls with his superb astrological knowledge. This is Dharmini with her husband Dharmaraj. More recently, she's lived in Chennai for a very long time, serving there, but this is in her beginning years. She's also a marvelous musician, a flute player, flautist, yes. Latika and Trimurti, Ananda really became, and this is, the history of, this is the last 2 decades from when I'm talking now, in the early 80s, Ananda really shifted from being primarily monastic to primarily householder, which, given the chaos of our society at this time, dynamic examples of uplifted marriages is among the many realities that Ananda came to express. This is one of them. So lifelong couples like this pair have really, it's not that they self-consciously tried to set an example. They just lived their own lives, and the example flowed from them naturally. Again, Trimurti and Lalita with Jyotish and Devi. What's very interesting, it's particularly true of Jyotish and Devi, it's almost like wherever they're photographed, there's a constancy to the way they appear. Swamiji is a lot like that also. Even sometimes when you look at his pictures as a child, if you just isolate the face, it's just the same face. Or even more profound, it's the same expression in the eyes. That's also very true of Anandamayi Ma. If you ever have an opportunity to see her pictures over years and just take out everything that seems to identify the uniqueness of the picture and just look at the face, you'll see that she fulfills her own comment about herself. I was always the same. And Jyotish and Devi have that same wonderful quality. This is a picture of the ping pong table. And I believe when this picture was taken, it was intended to be a picture of the ping pong table. This is perhaps the end of some hard-fought ping pong contest. I'm not really sure. But Ananda is we have a serious purpose, but part of the way we present that serious purpose is that we enjoy ourselves as much as we can. And when I talk about the chapter in the book, I'm going to speak a little more about that. But this is outside the farm, and it was some major event in which ping pong apparently played an important role. Well, Jeannie, just a lovely picture. She was I don't know whether she was singing or leading music, or there was just something exciting off to the side. But in any case, it's a lovely portrait of her. Oh, and Devi again with one of her dear sisters, Roma. At that time, of course, Roma was at the village. She was raising a daughter with Haridas. Later, they spent many years in Bangalore. This is the wedding of Janaki Devi and Vyasa. It was a late wedding for them, but they had, I think, 25 or 30 years together afterwards. But it was very dear because we'd known both of them for so many years. And they had both been single for all those years. And then Divine Mother brought them together in the sweetest possible way. The Brinks, Lucian and Sarah Brink. Sarah's a very gifted artist. Lucia's just a dear man, as you can see. They raised a family at Ananda Village. We're raising a family at this time. How they got onto a Ferris wheel, dressed what looks like for a choir concert, I'm not sure, Leela and Roma, but somewhere along the line, this is what, not a Ferris wheel, carousel. You can see the horses. But once again, we were always up to enjoy ourselves in ways that were uplifting to the spirit. This is the dining room at Il Rifugio in Assisi. A lot of Americans went over to visit Italy in 1999 because Swamiji wasn't coming back to the U.S. And if we wanted to see him, that's what we had to do. Shivani's leading a tour bus, which is something that she did really often in multiple countries. Hand on the microphone, telling some story. This might have been a choir tour. I say that because of the black and white. That was not a costume we normally wore, but at various times when the choir was singing, black and white would be the costume. Jaya and Sadhana Devi from the U.S. and Helmut and Maya Devi, who are actually from Frankfurt, Germany originally, but were also founding members of Ananda Assisi. So they became They became as much Italian as German, and in many ways as much American as anything. We just became a mongrel, which is called Master's Children, fulfilling his own mission to dissolve differences in our love for God. Again, in the dining room of Il Rifugio in Ananda, Assisi, this was the spiritual renewal that they had there, and 100 people came from the U.S. for that event. More of the same. Beautiful faces. And of course, we didn't always eat in the dining room. We had to go out to the local pizzeria as well, because it was just part of the pilgrimage to Italy. This is the bus, no doubt, where Shivani was instructing people. When so many people came from America, everything had to be worked out in large numbers. On the streets of Assisi, again in the dining room at Assisi, this is Indira McSweeney, wife of Gary and mother of Aryavan. More local color, more pizza, just pictures. Leela and David. Leela was Swamiji's cook. She cooked for him for about 20 years. I'm not sure that was her full-time job yet, but eventually that's what she began to do. She must have been working with Swami by then. And this is Swamiji and me, and I believe it was Ananda Palo Alto. And he was there because he always passed through when he could, and we would have events. Look at the color Swamiji's wearing. The rose-colored shirt, the blue tie, the blue jacket. He just thought, why be dull when you can be beautiful? Not himself, but he could create a beautiful atmosphere. He used to say, dressing nicely is a service to others, because after all, they're the ones who have to look at you. And he would always compliment especially beautiful color. It's the last picture in this series. This is Swamiji saying goodbye to us. Early in the morning, you can see Durga there. I think it was probably, a few of us from America who were leaving. And this is on the outside porch of Swamiji's house. He often had these, because he would often get up early in the morning and start writing, and then write all day and not really think about what time it was or where it was. He would often spend many hours, working hours in his bathrobe, because he just never wanted to stop the flow of energy to shower and dress. Eventually he would. So as a result, he made a point of having a collection of very nice bathrobes, which he would get made in India or in Thailand. And even at one point, I bought a lot of silk. We went shopping to the silk store, and I made a number of silk bathrobes for him also. And he sort of laughed about it, because it was in a certain sense his business attire. So with this last picture as our scene here, again, I'm going to stay with this for a moment. This was so vintage Kriyananda, in the sense of he was so unpretentious and so casual. Okay, we're going, and also so attentive. Come by and see me before you leave, even though it's relatively early in the morning and inconvenient for him. So we're all standing outside. So we knocked on the door, and he came outside, and we, talked for a few minutes, and then either literally he would bless us or hug us. Although by this time I think he was not hugging us anymore. But that was after the Bertolucci lawsuit, and there was so much evil, ugly things said about too much intimacy among people of Ananda. Swami just said, I'm not going to do that anymore. So prior to that, he used to just hug us in a very natural way, but he just took a step back. But he would either bless us literally or bless us all, bless us individually or just bless us all. So we knocked on the door. It was unthinkable for us to leave without saying goodbye to him, and it was unthinkable to him that he would let us leave without saying goodbye. So he came out in his bathrobe. The song that I want to play for you now is Emerald Isle, which it's a song about Ireland, technically, but really it's just a song about the extraordinary possibility of beauty in this world. And that's what it represents. And that's, of course, what Ananda represents. So let's enjoy listening to this song.
Come here while I sing you of emerald hills, of valleys and meadows so fair, that all who have seen them have carried away memories in their hearts, friends, like the lilacs of May. Oh, my song is the story of the lilacs of May. My song is the story of deer on the hills, of larks that soar seeking the sun, of nightingales lifting the curtain of night, as with music they bring down heaven's blessing of light. Oh, my song is the story of God's blessing of light. Come join me in singing of that emerald isle, of flowers that like jewels besprinkle the lea, of waterfalls eager to embrace the wide sea, as we with our Maker united would be, as we with our Maker reunited would be. Come here while I sing you of emerald hills, of valleys and meadows so fair, that all who have seen them have carried away memories in their hearts, friends, of the lilacs of May. Oh, my song is the story of the lilacs of May.
When Swamiji first wrote that song, he had a very, very hard time singing it because it was just so moving to him. The picture of the astral world, of the power that might be, is just so gorgeous. Huh. All right. 1999 was it was a real interesting period of time because it was the end of the Bertolucci lawsuit, and the effect of the Bertolucci lawsuit on Ananda was it just ripped through us. It was really something like impossible to imagine. So now it's over, and we have the impression that we're finally done with all of the litigation, and we're sort of trying to pick up the pieces. And Swamiji has gone. He's gone to Italy, and he's sort of told us he's not coming back. He was not inspired by our experience in the American justice system at any point in it, but especially at the end with what happened to us in that. And I don't have to reiterate it because it's already been talked about. But now we're sort of trying to pick up the pieces in the aftermath. And a lot of what happened in this year was really trying to put ourselves back together. We weren't fundamentally taken apart in the sense of we didn't have doubt about what we were doing, or I should put it differently, everyone who had doubts about what we were doing had gone over the course of all of the litigation years. They simply had left. And in 1998, Swami wrote the paper. He called it Ananda Directions, but it was a very strong statement that Ananda and Kriyananda are an indissoluble unit. You can't say, oh, I love Ananda, but I'm not much interested in Kriyananda, because it's just self-evident. It was common sense anyway, that his leadership is what made the community what it was. And this incredible effort over the course of that litigation by his Guru Bhais to prove that he was not a legitimate disciple and that what was coming through Ananda was not really master, on and on and on like that. Anybody who was vulnerable to that point of view pretty much had left. And by the end of 1998, Swami just said, it's one unit. And there were still people who just couldn't handle that. They wanted what Ananda was, but somehow they wanted to pretend that Swamiji's role wasn't important. So we were strong in ourselves, but I guess the word would be we'd lost our innocence. I think that's really the word that I want to use. And that's how I've always spoken of it in the years since. You know, we sort of entered into those litigation years in 1990 as children, and we came out as mature adults. We just didn't understand. The word I want to use is evil, but the word, a more accurate word would be, we just didn't understand that life is a battle. It's just a battle. Every spiritual epic in the world is a battle, and it was a battle. And we'd fought hard, we'd fought well, and we lost in court on the Bertolucci lawsuit, but we won on the one that mattered more, which is our right to be disciples. The losing of the Bertolucci lawsuit was just, well, these things happen. You know, wrong lawyer, wrong judge, and these things happen. But in our own hearts, we knew who we were, and we knew who we were, you know, with a power that had been tested in battle. But now we had to really figure out how to go forward. And we weren't really quite finished because Ananda, Nevada City, the primary Ananda, had to go into bankruptcy court in order to stop the litigation. And we didn't really know where that was going to end. It finally ended by the end of that year, but at the beginning of it, we really didn't know. And Swamiji started emphatically, let me think what I'm trying, self-definition, that's the word I'm looking for. You know, he said, if as a community, if as a group of people, if as individuals, we have a clear sense of our own self-definition, we don't need a lot of rules to enforce that. And Swami was just, you know, sort of reiterating things that we'd already known, but it was still, you know, it was very important to reiterate it because we had to sort of think now, who are we going to be and what are we going to do? And it came up in a very interesting way because service has always been very fundamental to Ananda. And because for so many years we were trying to build out of nothing, just pulling ourselves up by our bootstraps to make Ananda happen, what we often called kamikaze karma yoga was part of what we did, which was, it's just like serving to the point where your life expired virtually. But it wasn't really a balanced existence. And so the question came up, you know, how much service is enough service? Because in the context of building what we were building, and now, you know, we're building in other cities. We're building in Portland, in Seattle, in Palo Alto, especially during this time, because the paradox of the litigation years was they were also the most expansive years in Ananda's history. All of our urban communities were founded. Most of us developed communities and also got a freestanding church building, you know, moving out of just rented office space into a building that was really ours during the same years that we were paying literally millions of dollars to attorneys and all the fees that were associated with it. At the same time, Ananda's building on a level that was unprecedented and set the stage for everything that was coming, which also, even as we ourselves were reeling from it in 1999, we're watching this amazing combination of things. And in that context, someone asked Swami, how much service is enough service? Do I have to say yes to everything that's asked of me? And Swami, just in his way, going through this book, Light Bearer, which of course I'm the author of this book, and I put together all these different disparate threads and kept notes for 45 years, for all the years that I was with Swami, of all these things that happened. But looking at it in retrospect, it's just like you can just take one little tiny piece. That's what I tried to do in this book. I tried to make this book the handbook for us to be able to answer the question, which Swamiji himself says here. And he wrote this in Ananda's directions. He said, even in the future, when we have questions about what should we do, he said it isn't just a question of what Master's teachings are, but how did Swami bring those teachings particularly to us? Because once the decisions in the SRF lawsuit against us went in our favor, which was actually in the early 90s, and as I explained, when talking about earlier years, the Bertolucci lawsuit was an attempt by SRF to regain the rights that they'd lost. But by 1994, all of Master's original writings were in the public domain. In 1993, we published the original copy of the original version of Autobiography of a Yogi. The judge had declared that Yogananda's name and his image and his teachings could not be the exclusive rights of any one organization or individual. It was Yogananda for the world, which is how we always called it, Master for the world. And therefore, any disciple or any individual, self-declared, qualified or not, could claim, that this is what Master wanted. So Swamiji wanted us to understand that the particular ray of grace, and I explained this in earlier chapters, but the particular ray of Master was going to come to us into Ananda through Swamiji. And so there's lots of different styles. And because, in Swamiji's own life, there were so many different initiatives and so many different ways he expressed himself. Exactly the same was true with Master, even more so. An individual could make an entire lifetime out of just one little thing that Swamiji put forward. And Swami was picking up as many threads as he could of the many, many threads that Master put forward. So the question come back to it, how much service is enough service? And so then Swami answered in a most interesting way. He said, your service, of course, is fundamental to your discipleship, but it has to be balanced with giving yourself enough room, enough time for solitude, which is just the opportunity to be quiet within yourself and not always be engaged in interactions and even outward flowing energy, but just to be at rest within yourself, and therefore to assure your attunement with God. Because merely to serve, if you lose the vibration of what you're trying to do, then it's the energy first, the actions follow. But if the energy of those actions is not in tune with the presence of God within, then the result will not be what we're hoping for. I'll speak to that in a moment. But so enough solitude to maintain our attunement with God, which of course means meditation and everything that goes with us. And then he said, and then time for friendship. Time to be with our friends. That is also a fundamental part of what we're doing. And this is interesting because Swamiji always had time for his friends. Just what I was saying a moment ago, okay, you're leaving in the morning, come by and say goodbye. And it would be so easy, And in some ashrams, maybe even based on Master's teachings, they may decide that we're just impersonal. We don't have to say goodbye. But Swami says, knock on my door. And then he comes out in his silk bathrobe to say goodbye to all of us. And we were just together the day before. But our friendship is also important. And then he carries it a step further. In the context, there's a story in this particular chapter about a man who felt a romantic attraction to another woman in the community, which is, of course, perfectly reasonable. That's where people found their partners, for the most part, was other people in the community. But in this case, Swami knew that she was, in her heart, committed to someone else, whom she eventually married. She was single at that time, but he didn't know that her heart was committed. So he protested when Swami couldn't betray the confidence. He knew confidentially what that woman's commitment was. So he only had to say, I don't think it's going to happen. Then the man said, well, then why, when I look into her eyes, do I feel such a deep connection? And Swami's answer was, we're a very old spiritual family. We've been together for many, many, many lifetimes. He said, if you looked into the eyes of anyone here, you would feel a deep soul connection because you have that. And then Swami went even further to say, it's we've been all things to one another, positive and negative. Because sometimes you feel a great connection to someone, but it's a connection that causes you to want to express something other than loving affection. Because we've been all things to one another. Often, strong attachment, which creates expectations and desires. And if those strong attachments and the expectations and desires that come with them are thwarted, often the positive turns to negative. I mean, think about that. That's very complicated. But that's one of the ways that you can be very close and still be in disharmony. I had a relationship at the beginning with someone who, not a romantic relationship, but just I was embroiled with someone, and there was a lot of anger in the relationship. That's what I would say. And at a certain point, when I got far enough away from it to sense it more impersonally, I could feel on a very deep level that we had been very, very close and very attached to each other. But expectations and desires has been thwarted, and that had turned to anger. But underneath it, the bond was a deep, profound, spiritual one. So what can we say? Give me a moment. I want to find a certain point here and see if I've written it down properly. Yes. In Swamiji's autobiography, he talks about, it's in the later chapters, he talks about spiritual family, and he talks about how the soul gradually develops the ability first to attract and then to hold spiritual truths, the individual soul. It's not like in one lifetime you're just going along in a worldly way and then suddenly you have a God-realized master and everything changes. If you just look around you or even think in yourself how you developed, you see that you have the karma to bring to your attention these spiritual truths. And then over incarnations, you get to know these truths deeper and deeper. So you begin, as Swami puts it, not only to attract, but then to hold these spiritual truths within yourself, so that in future lifetimes, as increasingly those spiritual principles become more and more the central reality of your life. So the soul develops the awakening to attract and then hold these spiritual principles until those principles become the dominant value. Looking at my own life and just using myself as an example, I was always a truth seeker, even from when I was a child, before I had any context. I was always intently interested in what was true. I didn't want superficial answers for anything. I always wanted to know what was deeply true. And then before I was 20, I was brought to the teachings of self-realization. I knew about Yogananda's teachings. It wasn't until I was 22 when I met Swami Kriyananda that my truth-seeking absolutely just fixated on Swamiji and through him on Master, which is what he was bringing to us. But even before that, I had the karma to attract and hold on to these spiritual teachings. And then Swamiji says, over time, you develop companions. You develop brothers and sisters in truth, people who are looking for the same thing and have also developed the ability to attract and hold. And then we begin to move through our many incarnations as a family, not sometimes as a biological family. There are people within Ananda whom Swami confirmed and recognized as members of his biological family in previous incarnations. There was no one in his biological family this time who became a part of Ananda. But even if it's not a biological connection, sometimes it would be. Nonetheless, the power of our shared commitment and our shared seeking and the way that we serve the Guru's mission just really gradually over time bind us together in a very, very deep way. One of the reasons Swamiji says that Ananda has been so successful and has been able to remain together and strong over many, many incarnations is because we have this shared commitment, not just with God and Guru, but also with other souls. And then Swami goes on to say that before we can become self-realized, we also have to, as he puts it, spiritualize our relationship with the external world, which is that everything in creation is an expression of God's presence. And it's not that we reject that world in the sense of calling it dark or ugly. We just see that it too is an expression of God, and we spiritualize our relationship with it in the sense that we don't resist it anymore. We don't have to fight it. We just lose interest in it, is the best way that I can put it. There's a Sanskrit word for it, vairagya. And vairagya just means a disinclination for, quote, the things of this world. But that means that they don't attract us anymore. But that doesn't mean that we condemn them. We have found a way to hold our attunement with God, even living in this material world. And part of that is spiritualizing our relationship with our brothers and sisters in this family. And that's why we come back again and again and have to sort out the karma that we have with each other. I often put it in this way. We have a lot of karma with each other, and then we have to find the dharma within that karma. Because just having the karma is not in itself spiritually uplifting. We have to say, I feel attracted, or I feel an aversion. And then we have to ask ourselves, what is dharma in this situation? Dharma is that action which helps expand our consciousness. Instead of just following the momentum of past karma, how are we really going to relate to one another? And the whole years of the 90s were really all about that. It was all about our relationship to Swami Kriyananda, our understanding of the role that he plays in our life, an appropriate, balanced understanding of the role he plays in our life as Master's instrument to us. I said to Swamiji once, I feel like Master is the king of the country, and you are the prince assigned to run our particular province. And I said, and the king would not be pleased if we just kept going to the king instead of honoring the prince that he himself has put, in charge of our little circle of creation. And Swami said, yes, that's a very appropriate way to say it. And when Swami was writing at the end of the Bertolucci lawsuit in the late 90s and also, in the year I'm talking about, 1999, he talked about this in exactly that same way, which is that, it's not that he's trying to replace Master in any way, or that we should think of him as replacing Master, but it's through him and his attunement with Master and the particular project, the way we're going to serve Master through Ananda, it doesn't work for us to just disregard all of that that's been given to us. And this was also interesting, and this is all part of what was going on at this period of time. Every single ashram in America was attacked during that decade, every one of them. And mostly, they did not emerge intact. They were attacked and they did not emerge intact. And also, Swami Kriyananda said, and I've talked about this earlier, that he was standing in for the whole yoga movement, because the yoga movement in America is, and was at that time, bringing in an enormous amount of light. And when there is an enormous amount of light, there is especially in moving light, coming in with power, there's just this, it's duality. There's this force that tries to pull it away. And so every ashram was attacked, and they were almost all attacked. In fact, they were all attacked on the same grounds, that somehow there was this standard of behavior that we thought we had a right to demand, and then in some way it wasn't being presented as it should have been. And then because of litigation and because of the way the world works, it just all went this way. And most of those ashrams split internally, that there was a fundamental break inside. Ananda was attacked from the outside, which was unique. We had an enemy on the outside, so to speak, someone who wanted us to come down. And the Bertolucci lawsuit was just an extension of SRF's effort to keep absolute control. And I've already talked about it. I don't have to explain it to you. But we went all the way through the jury trial. And as it happened, we lost. We didn't lose on the merits, but we lost because you can lose in court without losing on the merits. Anyway, so we did. Again, it's all in the book and I've explained it. But the core of Ananda did not fracture. And so once it was all done, we just went on. And in fact, the core of Ananda had become much, much stronger, much more mature, much more adult about the way we did it. And so right at this time also, Swami wrote something very interesting, which is he wrote his last will and testament. I mean, he was already, advanced in years, and he'd had open heart surgery, and there was just a lot going on. So he thought it was a good idea to write his last will and testament. I highly recommend, and it's easy to find. I don't have it completely in Lightbearer, but you can go online and find it. It's very, very interesting. And I'm recording this not in 1999. I'm well past it. When I'm recording this, we're well into the 20s. When I'm saying all of this, but various things that I articulated in Lightbearer have become just so vividly true to me in ways that I didn't really appreciate before. And so I'm just going to pull out one small thing. Swami makes a strong point of the books he's written in his last will and testament. And he talks about, and he suggests to us something he suggested all during his lifetime, which we haven't yet carried out, which that each one of his books should be a whole department within Ananda. Material success through yoga principles, how to spiritualize your marriage, super conscious living, super consciousness, education for life, and art as a hidden message, artistic, creative self-expression, leadership. I mean, these are just a few that come into my mind just sitting here thinking about it. But the point being that every area of human existence needs to be blessed and guided by the principles of self-realization. And that's sort of basically, when I think about it, that's what I think about. That's how Swami wrote. If self-realization is the goal of life, if our relationship with God is the most important aspect in life, how would you educate children? If self-realization is the goal of life, if our attunement with God is the single most important thing we're doing. How do you carry out in marriage? And then what do you do about money? And then I want to paint, I want to dance, I want to sing. What do you do about artistic expression? And you can see each one of those, again, you could spend lifetimes just on that single thing. And that's our job. Those of us who are connected to Master through Ananda's expression, which now that Swami's not in the body, it may not be as clear to people as it was clear to us. Everything about Ananda is the attunement that Swamiji had to Master's teachings and his creative commitment to it. And so what does that mean? How do we work with that? And, I remember around this period of time, this woman was becoming involved in Ananda. She had a very promising energy as a devotee, and Swamiji was trying to help her as much as he could. And once as it happened, we were sitting around the dinner table in the house that I live in, and he sort of asked her, "Well, have you read this book?" And she said, "Of his." "No." And then he said, "Well, have you read this book?" And she said, "No." And I think by the time he got to the third one of us rescued her. Swamiji, she happened to be a very small woman. I said, "Sir, if you piled all your books up next to her, they would be taller than her." He said, "It's not fair." I said, "We got to read them one at a time as you wrote them. By the time she's come onto the scene, there are so many in front of her." And of course, Swami laughed too. We were all just joking about it. But what he was actually saying is, and this is very important, learn the teachings. That was his legacy. Learn the teachings. Don't be superficial in your understanding. Don't think just because you have a little bit of this or you're good at that. He said, this is a revolution. Take the trouble, especially in those areas that are really important to you, whatever those areas might be. And attune yourself to what Swamiji said. And through what Swamiji said, attune yourself to Master. Look, I've been reading Swami's books my whole life over and over again. I mean, not all of them. Some of them speak to me more than others, obviously. But I am consistently amazed by the depth and magnitude of what's there. And by just one sentence that I'll just read and see. Even in preparing for this class, just going through, the 1999. Just that solitude, attunement with God, time with your friends. Even when Swami was extremely busy, we would come over to his house in the late afternoon to sort of bring mail and messages, and we'd sit down, we'd have a cup of tea. He just was never too rushed to just sit down and have a cup of tea. And we'd just chat together about this or that. It wasn't all, business all the time. He would hear the news, he was interested. Balanced living, that's what Master wanted us to have. All right. Well, now just to finish sort of what Swami was doing during this time, Swami really felt that Europe was a priority for him. He felt Ananda village, where he'd presented most of his energy, was well on its feet and making very good decisions. He turned much of the responsibility for Ananda as a whole, but especially for the village, over to Jyotish and Devi at this time, and he just didn't feel it was necessary for him to be there. And his presence, as he put it, just didn't make that much difference. Even when he was present at Spiritual Renewal Week or not, attendance was about the same. But when he was in Assisi and was in residence and was giving programs, 100 people would come. He was the only direct disciple of Master actively teaching, available to the public in all of Europe. And, they were hungry for who he was. And Italians particularly, and this was notable, I've mentioned this elsewhere, that they have a tradition of saints. And Italians, as a culture, trust their hearts in a way that Americans don't do. Americans have very good hearts and are very easily inspired. There's a wonderful free energy in this country that you don't find everywhere. Even those who are more influenced by the British are just more reserved in the way they relate. But Americans are extremely, almost, um, comically open-hearted about things. It was a long-standing joke when the United States was in a war, a competition with the Soviet Union at that time, to be the first one to put a man in space or put a man on the moon, competing with the Soviet Union. It wasn't necessarily a friendly competition, but we were trying to get to the moon, and it was suggested that what America should do is America should get a dog and get the dog to the moon. And we had enough technology to get the dog to the moon. We just didn't necessarily have the technology to save him and get him back. But if Americans got a dog to the moon and then needed to develop the technology and the resources to get that dog back, everyone in America would give everything. The children would give all their allowances, and we'd get that dog back, because that's the kind of heart Americans have. But we also have this quality of wanting to be shrewd. And it's really important to Americans not to appear naive. So those two qualities war with each other. As Swami put it, the Italians got over that long time ago. So he was able, he was accepted. No, let me say that. That's not what I mean. He was able to have a tremendous impact on what was going on in Italy. So he just moved there. Plus, he was just tired of all that was going on in the U.S. He was tired, as he put it, of even within Ananda, people, the niggling criticisms, is how he put it. Just sort of like open season, we can just complain about everything we want to complain about. And he also, as he said to us later, he just wanted us to he wanted to leave us alone to figure it out. He didn't want to impose his leadership on us. He didn't want to impose his point of view on us. If we weren't, as a community, if we didn't have an open-hearted willingness to accept what he had to offer, then he was not going to impose it on us. He would just go to Europe and he would live there forever. So we had this long period of time, where 2 years actually, before he came back to the U.S. Swamiji, however, was also very concerned that we were going to, as he said, we were exhausted from the legal battles and we just wanted to go home and shut the door and just go back to our own life. And he knew that if we contracted, it would not serve us. So in his way, he sent out this letter to us with this. It was at the time, even it was just a little inexplicable to us. In retrospect, everything is clear, but Swami just wanted to generate an expansive attitude. So he announces to us that we should try to draw 1 million members into Ananda. And it was just like, we'd never thought in terms of like, how many members do we have? We never counted, and we never thought we were succeeding. So he suddenly suggested we should have 1 million members, and that every individual should commit themselves to this goal of having 1 million members of Ananda. And he did not say, card carrying, dues paying. And in fact, he just said, 1 million people who have become inspired and are in tune with what we're doing. And I can't say that I was in tune enough to really get what was trying to happen. But by the time I wrote this book, a year later than 10 years later than the year I'm talking about now, I understood it. He was just trying to say to us, sharing, giving, constantly saying, how can I serve? I mean, that's what our future is. Not, oh, well, we've done enough and that world is no fun, let's go back inside. This is spiritualizing our relationship with the world. Because you can't just reject it because it's too unpleasant. Your relationship with the world is your ability to serve. That's what spiritualizing your relationship is. Not thinking about self, but always thinking about how I can serve. And it's quite reasonable to just stay in your cave and do nothing but meditate. But if we meditate only with the selfish action of what I can get, then our meditation will hit a wall. It always has to be, how can I serve? And that's what he was trying to get us to say. And no, we never got 1 million members, but it at least interrupted what was a strong tendency to just withdraw and live the wonderful life we had without regard. Swami also called all the leaders of Ananda to come to Ananda Assisi, all the leaders of the various communities. And we had a community, we had a 2 weeks, we spent 2 weeks together with Swamiji, and we talked about all aspects of Ananda, everything that needed to be discussed, that we needed to come to clarity, we needed to come to an understanding of our self-definition and how we would carry it forth. It wasn't like plans, we didn't make plans, but with Swamiji, if you can get in tune with the basic idea, if the energy is right, then everything else will naturally follow from that. And so that's what Swamiji was doing with us. He wanted us all to come together and to really get in tune. And from that, you know, the rest of the years of life with Swami went forward. It was a marvelous thing. Now, the last irony of the whole story was, while all of this is going on in Italy, we're still in bankruptcy court. And there's certain things about the American legal system. We had a big judgment that we had against us. We had to pay all this money to Bertolucci and her lawyers like that. And judgments in court go to the front of the line for whatever money is owed. And when you're in bankruptcy court, it was very complicated. And there was a period of time when, I mean, and the court can order you to sell off whatever assets you have. One of the biggest assets that we had was all of Swami's creative work, all his music, all his writing, all of that. And the copyrights to all his creative work. And in truth, the work had enormous value and enormous future potential, but as a financial asset in that moment, the sales and the interest in those products was not significant. However, Bertolucci's lawyers, who are still harassing us through all of this, had an anonymous buyer that was willing to pay $1 million for the copyrights to all of Swami's creative works. The only possible anonymous buyer had to be SRF. And by having a buyer at that price, we were in serious danger that the court would compel us to sell all those copyrights for that money, so that money could then be used to pay off the legal judgment. And it was awful. And Swamiji was just like, you know, Master, I did all this work for you if you want to take it away from me, because of course SRF's intention was not to sell it, it was to bury it. It would just take everything Swami had done off the map, his whole life's work off the map. So this is all going on. And by the grace of God, Vasanta, Vidura, and a few others, and our own attorneys, just managed to find the money, managed to find the moral strength to just stand up to that. And on December 29th of 1999, finally, all of that was closed down. The copyrights were preserved, and financial settlement was agreed upon. And we thought, thank God, it's over. It was quite a decade, the 90s for Ananda. Now it's history. But oh my, what an experience that was. You know, God tests his devotees. And by the grace of God, we made it through. So now I would like to show you some more pictures from that period of time. I'm having to breathe in and out for a minute because I was too vividly involved in what I was just talking to you. This first picture is a lovely picture. This is Linda and Jim Gerber in Ananda Assisi visiting Swami Kriyananda. These two lovely souls were members of the congregation of Ananda Palo Alto, and very great supporters of Swami and Swami's work. Jim was successful as a businessman, and he helped finance. I'm nearly certain he helped publish the first edition of Autobiography of a Yogi and other specific projects of Swamiji. His wife, Linda, had had breast cancer, and she'd managed to overcome that. But right at this time, it came back, and it was invading her brain. And she was afraid that she would die before Swami came back to America. So she invited David and me, and we went over to Italy to be with Swami so she could have his blessings before she passed. She was well, he's still living, and by the grace of God, attracted to himself another lovely wife, and has had a very, recovered from the loss of his first wife, Linda. But they were beautiful souls. We had this wonderful time with Swami. But it was also, I know I'm holding this picture for a long time. It was very meaningful to me personally, of course. But Swamiji was such a friend. He was just a friend. Jim and Linda had extended themselves in great friendship to Swamiji, and he responded. He did not hold himself aloof. Again, as I was saying, he was always dignified and very appropriate, but utterly open-hearted. All right, so this is Helen Purcell in those years. Helen went on to become the director of our school for 28 years. She was a professional educator, and the Ananda Living Wisdom School in Palo Alto has succeeded largely because of her dedication. Just musicians, Duty and Panduranga, playing their guitars. Michael Gornick, who was a longtime resident of Ananda Village and then also founded Polestar later in Hawaii. Beautiful, dedicated devotee. Michael with his son, Abram. I don't know, I watched once from a distance this little 5-year-old girl run across like a 25-yard space. She saw her daddy on the other side. Daddy, daddy, daddy. She runs across, just takes a flying leap, knowing he'll catch her in his arms. And I think on two sides. First you think, oh, human love is so beautiful. And then you think, oh, how vulnerable your heart becomes. And so this is the great challenge of life, isn't it? To recognize if I open myself completely, then I have the bliss of having opened myself completely. And then because change is inevitable, then I have to move. God asked me to move on. So what do we love? Do we love the form that God has given us to love, or do we love God behind that form? And if we love God, then when the forms change, nothing changes. But we may still weep a few tears. I mean, who could not be attached to such an adorable son? And as my father said to me, with tears in his eyes, the child disappears into the adult. And that particular chapter of life is gone forever. So this is the extraordinary challenge of being a devotee. To love completely, but to love God behind all that God sends us. Tim Shantz and Jeannie, music in Crystal Hermitage. Let's see, where are we? We're in some Ananda home, and obviously we're having a women's tea party. These are many of the ladies of Ananda Village. Another gathering in a private home somewhere, celebrating. And again, this is a mixed party, but all the women gathered on one side. The context looks like Christmas. Clearly the context is Christmas. Now we're into an elf hat. Haridas and Roma, Kent Williams, Jivta, Vidura. Huh. Leela, Uma, and Diana. Leela goes on Swami's staff. Uma's now in Assisi. Diana ended up in India, but in 1999 everyone was still at the village. Mary Kretzmann, outstanding householder, raised with her husband 3 children at Ananda village and developed the prayer ministry just out of the determination of her own soul. Leela Hogendijk and her dear husband, David. Sitabai, with her youngest child, Jaya. She had 4 sons, and this was the last arrival. Ooh, little baby goats at the school at Ananda village. Children had such a wonderful upbringing there, out in the country with the extended community and so many opportunities to be part of the natural world. This is Krishnabai with Shanti Polachek. Vidura and Durga and their grandchildren. They raised 2 children at Ananda village, and for a time their daughter came and lived there again. And then as God makes children so cute, you can just hardly bear it. They're just so adorable. Adventures down at the market area. There's a lot of smoke going, so it looks like there was some kind of an exercise, either in fire prevention. It doesn't look like a real fire because the children are playing. I think there were times when the fire department either trained or demonstrated, the volunteer fire department, using resources that we had. Yeah, I think what we did, I think we actually burned down a building on purpose. I'm a little vague on the details here. I think we decided to get rid of the building by burning it and using it as a fire prevention exercise. We must have been very confident in what we were doing. Can you imagine how exciting that was for the children? Oh my goodness. Yep, there it is. We're just all having a picnic on the lawn watching this building be burned down. I didn't live there at that time. I was already living in Palo Alto, but I remember hearing about it. I think it was the easiest way to take it down, and we had a training exercise with it. This was a school event. Our lives were so informal at Ananda village that nobody ever got a chance to dress up, and nobody ever learned anything about formal etiquette. So from time to time with the older children, we would have what we called these etiquette dinners, in which they would serve dinner and the children would all dress up, because we didn't have proms or anything like that. The children would all dress up, and then they would have to behave in a very different way than they would normally behave, and they would have to learn proper manners at the table. And so here's a bunch of our children all dressed up for the occasion. The principal of the school at one point, Jake Hasbond, who was principal for a while, he realized that many of the children had never seen a man in a necktie. So he started coming to work every day, to school every day, just wearing a tie, because the children didn't even know what a tie was. I mean, you can grow up casual, but you don't want to grow up like barbarians. I mean, I'm exaggerating, but nonetheless, it was decided that we would take a little step in it, because we didn't want them to not be comfortable we couldn't, no one could guarantee that they would live in Ananda forever, and most of them didn't. They needed to be comfortable in many different situations, so we had to start creating it, or take them on trips, and lots of things are possible, but that's what this picture is. Oh, and this was the baseball team. Brian Powers, we called him Bajrang, he coached the girls. He had a girls' softball team. It was great fun. He was not, sports was not his first interest in life, but taking care of helping young people was. So the girls team had really tons of fun together. He also brought some of the young people together in a musical group called the Fiddlesticks. Music was something he did know, and so here's a picture of the Fiddlesticks, which was some like middle school age, mostly girls, I think also. No, there were some boys in this one. who they performed locally, and they would perform for the community, and they made a recording. They just had lots of opportunities because of the commitment of the community to their well-being. This is some kind of a costume. I don't know what she's supposed to be. This is Maggie, who's our costume maven, keeps the costume shop. This was probably the 4th of July, or it's not Halloween, it's the summer, so it's the 4th of July. I think it says it's a cigarette girl. So this must have been based on some commercial model that I have no idea. And why she would choose that is beyond me, but my goodness, look at the costume. Two of the young boys. This is Kashi Betts and Ben Skillman growing up together. Beautiful. One of the performances of a dance performance, Lori Van Atta, who's the woman standing up in white, she was a very gifted choreographer, and she created a lot of innovative ways to to dance to Swami's music. She really started a whole style of music, of dancing, that was extremely uplifting and original, and it was marvelous. She taught both the adults and the children. Christmas music, Christmas choir, and a group would go into town every year. At Christmas time, the Nevada County had some kind of a outdoor Christmas celebration on the sidewalks, and our group would always get in costume, helped by the lady who was in the cigarette costume before, Maggie, and go into town. And it was one of the ways we had of integrating our community with the greater community. Again, this is within Ananda. They were performing traditional Christmas carols. Dharmadas and Nirmala were always part of it also, because both were great singers. This is Agni with his back to us. This is a choir performance, and Swami is singing a solo. This was an oratorio performance. Oh, this is in Italy. This is the choir in Italy singing, and Swamiji singing with them. This is one of when the leaders were meeting with Swamiji, and in Italy we went sightseeing. This is the leaders, Ananta and Maria from Sacramento, and Padma and Freeman from Portland, from Seattle, and Pranaba and Parvati from Portland, and Kirtani from Ananda, Sisi, Vidur from the village. Once I started, I had to name them all. And we were just sightseeing in front of the Basilica of St. Francis in Italy. It was a wonderful gathering. Maria Mixuini, she looks like she's in Sacramento there. This is some of the men, also in Assisi, Jyotish and Hriman, David Praver, Ananta, Anand. You can just see the friendship, just what Swami was saying. We're a very old spiritual family. Lovely. Some of the women, same sightseeing journey. Again, all together. Sitting with Swamiji in the dining room of Seva Kutir. I believe we were traveling somewhere in Europe. I'm not sure exactly where we were. Again, also with Swamiji. It may have been in Ananda Sisi, but I think we were traveling somewhere. This is the Temple of Light in Assisi. Swamiji is helping the singers interpret the music the way he wants it to be sung, the way he knows it, not the way he wants it to be sung, the way he heard it, so they can reproduce it the way it was given to him. Jamuna and Swamiji. David Praver and Swamiji. I can't remember what made them both laugh so much, but there was some joke that they were sharing and enjoying immensely. This is back at Crystal Hermitage at Ananda Village. And this is all the leaders in Assisi. This is the community leaders from the various Ananda colonies with Swamiji at that 2-week meeting that we had there. A very old spiritual family. Okay, let me see, is this, yeah, this is the last. This is Swami Kriyananda in 1999. And now also, just a moment here. The last song for today is Home is a Green Hill.
Home is a green hill, home is a wind, blowing betrayal far, far away. Home is the knowledge heaven is near, home's the end of the fray. Home is my heart's land, home's where I am. Nothing can dim the light of my soul. Home is forever, home is today. Home's a heart that is whole. Often I dream that life is a play, laughter forever and skies never gray. But when I'm silent, freed from all care, I discover my home's everywhere. Home is a green hill, home is a wind, blowing betrayal far, far away. Home is the knowledge heaven is near, home's the end of the fray. Home is my heart's land, home's where I am. Nothing can dim the light of my soul. Home is forever, home is today. Home's a heart that is whole. Often I dream that life is a play, laughter forever and skies never gray. But when I'm silent, freed from all care, I discover my home's everywhere. Home is a green hill, home is a wind, blowing betrayal far, far away. Home is the knowledge heaven is near, home's the end of the fray.